So here I have my part on why their new left, quote unquote, roots are largely bullshit. Okay, first of all, they would say that they oppose the Vietnam War. They didn't fucking really oppose the Vietnam War. No, that is total hogwash. Okay, so according to some sources, according to some of his friends, he was very concerned about his political career when he went to the protest, and he was even reluctant to go to some of them. And some people, some sources claim that the reason for this is because that he was actually that both Clinton, Bill, and Hillary. Frankly, I don't see any reason to separate them at this point, but I want to be clear on this. Both of them were more or less keeping an eye on the student movement, and they would never break with their more politically mainstream bosses in during their college years. Let me get the quote from Clinton about what she actually thought of the Vietnam War. She treated it as this kind of mistake that Lyndon Baines Johnson inherited from previous administrations. Uh, Not only that, but in the 1968 DNC protests, she blamed the anti-war protesters for provoking the officers under Richard Daley, the older Daley, the greater Daley, uh, and yet they didn't. There's no evidence for their opposition of the Vietnam War. If anything, it kind of goes towards the opposite. Um, you know, she sympathized with Lyndon Baines Johnson. She considered him one of the greats, but and just let's see how many. Yeah, 3 million, 1 to 3 million Vietnamese people. Yeah, their death was a mistake, and she uses the same rhetoric on her vote for the Iraq War. So that, yeah, no, that is way overblown. That's way overblown. Uh, I mean, she was a Republican until about 1968, and frankly, that was in the aftermath of the Kent State massacre and massive suppression. Really, the Republicans weren't really funding that many youth movements under Nixon, so this was purely a political calculation. And even the feminism, which is really the only new left thing she held on to for Hillary Rodham Clinton, it was more of a utilitarian thing, honestly. I mean, it was just for currying favor. These aren't ideological people, and they were never the driver of any of this. Um, Ironically, when Hillary Rodham Clinton said that she was a Goldwater girl, referring to the Johnson versus Goldwater campaign, that essentially puts her in the same political milieu as John Bolton, the psychotic, recently fired national security advisor under Trump, who's now going to become the resistance hero, I guess. Uh, yeah, that so. So other reasons why their new left roots are largely bullshit. Um, well, first of all, they even though they worked on the George McGovern campaign, they essentially the only real thing they took from the George McGovern campaign was his loss. And they basically took this to be their only real lesson from the new left, which is we can't we can't give the new left what they want. We gotta constantly keep moving rightward. And so some of these neocon conspiracy theorists will say, oh well, they worked under they worked under these kind of left wing professors, these left wing radicals. You had your Michael Lerners, your Saul Alinsky's, but okay, first of all, Alinsky wasn't ideological. He explicitly was non-ideological. He was about a kind of about technique, really, about community organizing, about how to seize power. So he never focused on theory, um, and so there wasn't really anything to Clinton's idea of paying attention to Saul Alinsky being a Marxist because Alinsky wasn't ideological at all. And so, she said that her line was always she had the brain of a Republican and the heart of a Democrat, which just sounds like the most pithy, terrible thing. I found a quote from the Progressive Review, which is this. I guess it's kind of been gutted now, but in the early internet, you'd see this stuff around, and they wrote, no wonder why Americans are sick of the media. They keep feeding us lies like the crap that the Clinton represents the '60s. Now, this myth was very important because they wanted to turn out the baby boomer generation for these people. So let me just get back into what Alinsky was about because this is very important. I think this quote from him is super telling. So here's a quote from Trotsky. I think this is the only time I'm going to quote Trotsky positively because this, I think this part honestly gets at why I'm starting to at least give neoconservatives their due credit on some aspects. Because unlike the neoliberals, they actually do have an ideology. The problem is this ideology fills the vacuum that's left by the people on the other side of the party. People like Clinton, and whose college advisor basically ditched any idea of theory, of ideology. It was all just about organizing, about yeah, it's just about you know it was just about getting his way using community organizing, really. Uh, and there's plenty of other problems with Alinsky, but the main problem with Alinsky is this quote from Trotsky. How many times have we met a smug centrist who reckons himself a realist merely because he sets out to swim without any ideological ballast, whatever and is tossed by every vagrant current? He is unable to understand the principles are not a dead ballast, but a lifeline for a revolutionary swimmer. So this, I think, perfectly describes Clintonism in so many levels. To call him a Marxist is way overselling it. And he teaches them basically avoid, and gives them a lesson on how to work within the democratic channels that they have. And it's so they, he just teaches how to be a void of nothingness that just acts militant. And he's basically the start of this kind of smug centrism. But there's a reason that this is where centrism basically ends up. The center is not really a it's not a static thing. Centers are created, and you get this center in the 80s towards the end of the Cold War, and it basically just stays what is the center, or is at least supposed to be the center today. And so you can see the way that the Clintons embraced this new left, but only as a utility. Okay, so for example, that when she first got into this talk of human and civil rights, it was basically to support this uprising going on in Czechoslovakia, which was basically, well, I wouldn't say it was totally instigated by the CIA. It was definitely in their interest, to the point where Zbigniew Brzezinski of the State Department would go to set up the leader of this little uprising with this nice little apartment in Manhattan, and you'd see her embrace of civil rights just being used with these totally ghoulish ulterior motives. So this begs the question what their real roots are. Well, their real roots are as Cold War liberals, which I found another great quote on. This is from Russ Wellen in the Foreign Policy in Focus. Uh, she's been inside the defensive Democratic Party carcass of Cold War liberalism for so long that she believes it to be the only possible reality. She didn't notice until right now how much the political landscape had shifted. And what that means is that she's basically taking LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was just this hawkish, kind of boisterous figure, and she takes that and she goes, okay, that's what's realism. That's what's realistic. But it shifts to the point where you have what's called crackpot realism, which is where you portray these insane premises as realism, which fits nicely with their kind of triangulation, with their attempt to be above politics, above ideology, and they basically end up defending these absolutely insane premises.